Welcome to the Alpha Movement Podcast and another episode of the Mindset RX series, where I, Tom Foxley, am extracting the mindset of the functional fitness world's best athletes and coaches, as well as some experts on neuroscience, psychology, and mindset in general. The teachings from the Mindset RX series are going to be compiled into the Mindset RX book for functional athletes and coaches to master an athlete and create a champ's mindset. On today's episode, I'm joined by Mr. Brian Mackenzie of Power Speed Endurance XPT, and now his new book. Let me start that again. I'm joined by Brian Mackenzie of Power Speed Endurance XPT, and now his new book Unplugged, which is co-written with friend of the show, Dr. Andy Galpin. Like, Brian's all over the place at the moment, and if you've been paying attention, like, he's everywhere and doing incredibly important stuff. Hence why I wanted him on the show. But today is all about mastering presence in your training, basically removing technology because it's so important. I introed Brian on the last episode we did, which was, I think it was about a year ago, on the Alpha Movement Podcast. I think there's the first series as well, so I think it's episode number 26. If you're unsure of him or his work, just check that out. The general consensus is that too often in life and training we're distracted by tech. It's a massive problem in performance and life in general. And we discussed the ways to get around this, as well as going deeper into the subject on a few levels. This is a conversation I could have spent another 2 or 3 hours on. Honestly, it's fascinating. Now, I'm going to bring you Mr. Brian Mackenzie. So, Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
It's a real pleasure. Obviously, we're going to cover the book in huge detail, but why don't you start by talking about the origins of Unplugged and like the realizations that came about before that led up to the production of Unplugged?
Well, I think most of my career has been based around a lot of technology, but the difference in what I've seen, not only with myself, well, it's not what I've seen with myself. I've seen myself make a lot of mistakes, and then I've seen a lot of the people I've worked with, athletes or whoever, make a lot of the same mistakes. And that was manifested, I think, largely by a particular client who we were doing a 10-mile run. And we had just started the run, and we were running at, like, I don't know, a 6:45 or 6:50 pace or something, right around the 7-minute mark. And for me at the time, that wasn't particularly fast. I had done 10 miles. I could hold about a 6-minute mile pace at the time for 10 miles. But for him, and the importance of this is him, he didn't believe he could. And so when we were out, we were like a couple miles in, and he kept looking at his watch, and he's like, we need to slow down. We need to slow down. We need to slow down. And I'm like, why do you keep looking at your watch? And he goes, because if my heart rate goes to 166, I'm going to blow. And I was looking at him, and I'm like, I just had this epiphany, and I was like, fuck, I've really made this guy dependent on a number, based instead of a feeling. Now, this is like almost 15 years ago, right? So this is a little bit of time ago. But it was a very interesting thing, because I was like, I instantaneously was like, hey, if you were going to blow, you wouldn't be talking to me right now. And he just was like, oh. And so that was when I started to really realize that there was something more to us, really, like technology moving faster than we were evolving. And that's the problem in part. Now, I'm not saying we can't be on board with technology. We have to be on board with technology because of the way it's accelerating. But we also have to be very aware that we are actually designed to function like the highest functioning animals in the world. I recently went swimming with sharks, and it was interesting because we jumped in the water with a bunch of sharks. There were like 30 or 40 of them, and it was interesting because they weren't necessarily tame sharks. We were in the middle of the ocean, and 3 miles out from Oahu, and the sharks feed off energy. And when our energy was calm and we were following our guide and we were listening to him, there was no issue. Two of the guys that I was with started to freak out a little bit. And instantaneously, we didn't know they were freaking out, but the shark's energy just started moving. And it was like, and our guide instantaneously knew. He like had everybody come up and he's like, hey, calm down, relax. And so we started making, and my buddies were just like, yeah, I kind of started freaking out and and they picked up on each other's energy. And long story short is we've got all this tech that's telling us how much we should sleep, when we should sleep, what our sleep cycle's like, what our mood's like, what our, all this stuff is like. And yet we are by design capable of walking into a room and understanding if somebody's in a bad mood, good mood, who's got bad energy, good energy, all of that. And yet we're blowing all of that off and becoming dependent upon something. We're relying on something to tell us how things are or what things are. And nothing is going to be better than you and your intuition and your ability to understand these things. But because we've gotten so far off, and I'm just as guilty as anybody, because I've become the world of convenience we've created, including in human performance, has literally pulled us away from what it is we're really truly capable of. I think Chris McDougall did a fine job of exploring this in Natural Born Heroes. Granted, it was a little more dull than his previous book. But that said, it was a very important look at why are we not doing a lot of the things we used to do. Why are people not lifting things the way that they used to lift them? Like that stone that hasn't been lifted in something like 400 years, it's 1,000 pounds. Like, why aren't people running 50 miles back to back in ways that, sure, there's people who are doing some cool shit, but by and large, the majority of people who are glued to these races and what they're doing and being dependent on sugar and aid stations and inability to adapt, and yet they're just destroying themselves. And it's like, we're not listening to things and we're letting technology override a lot of these processes. And my relationship with Andy Galpin happened because he didn't really like what he thought I stood for. And so he kind of came to listen to what I was saying, and I did a podcast, I think it was Barbell Shrugged, and he listened to it, and he was like, oh, I didn't realize he was actually doing science. And in essence, I'm doing the poor man's science. I'm just somebody who's screwing around with research and development. I get interested in something, and I gather I try and triangulate everything. I'm using some technology. I'm using I'm using how I feel, and I'm using performance to a large degree to gauge what we're doing and how I'm doing it. And it's an N=1 thing. And then if I see something, then it's like it goes out to my first layer of people. And this first layer of people have been people who've been around me for quite some time, and then people who've come to me and who have real interest in figuring out, like, or getting involved in things like I've been doing for themselves. And then it goes out to the second layer, which it tends to be kind of social media, right? And then it then goes and hits like that big layer of, like, we've got PhDs and people like the Andy Galpins who now have moved into that kind of first layer for me, because it's no longer I have to just go to my friends. My friends are now PhDs and people who are doing real science and research. And a lot of these people aren't taking money from big pharma and people who are trying to make what they're studying work. They're just trying to understand more about something. And so that's the game science is largely played, is and that's the problem I've had with science. Science has done the exact same thing religion has done. And you've even got some of the greatest scientists in the world playing that game. You got this Neil deGrasse and, Tyson who's telling everybody, you need to believe in this, you need to believe in this. And it's like, well, isn't science has never been wrong? And the fact is science is wrong every single time. It's just only right until it's proven wrong.
Exactly.
And that's the thing. And it's like, you can't buy into the bullshit of everything is dogmatic and you need to follow this and that. And that dude, that's not how science actually works. And so science is gone after power where religion went after control. And so when you've got somebody like an Andy Galpin, and I realize I'm kind of going down a wormhole here, or a rabbit hole here, but this loops back around to where guys like Andy don't give a shit about getting large funding companies. He wants to be funded, yes, but he wants to do it independently, and he wants to learn about the things he wants to learn about. He's not trying to prove something right. He's trying to find out what we don't understand. And that means learning what we don't know, which means we were wrong. And so that's kind of what my role has been is, here's this, like, take for instance, when we originally came up with the endurance model that we did. I was a long, slow distance endurance athlete, and it destroyed me after about 4 years. And I was a hot mess, and I was weak. I couldn't recover. And sure, there was a lot of things surrounding that, but it largely was just going out and running and riding. And I wasn't swimming long, slow distance, but running and riding long, slow distance. And that was one of the things, ironically, the swimming, that I started thinking about. And I'm like, how come I've never gone out and really just swam for like a mile straight, other than in an Ironman or a half Ironman? Like, never done that. And I swam for, I've been swimming my entire life since I was like 4 years old. And that's never been something I've done, yet I've been a decent swimmer, and I've finished very well in triathlons and in events with swimming, and done very little swimming for it. And so started looking at some of these dots and connecting these things. And it's not about volume. It's about, hey, technically what's going on and all this stuff. And so when we introduced this whole concept to people after I had gone through it, after the trainers I was working with had gone through it, and after all of our clients had started going through it, and everybody was having the same results, then we pushed it out, and people were like, "Oh, you can't do this. This is like, da da da." And it was like, "But what's wrong?" Well, like, but we did do it, and we are doing it. And then it became, well, you're not an elite level athlete, and it's like, oh, okay. I get it. So we're fairly insecure about this whole thing. And it's like, the way I was doing it is not the only way to do it. There are several ways to always do anything. And that's the other beauty in it. And when, this is the essence of what Unplugged is about learning what is possible and not being attached to something that isn't a part of you, because your technology is not a part of you, although it may be a matter of time before it is. The fact is that we have infinite possibilities, and these allow us to understand ourselves on a deeper layer when we've more or less hacked ourselves away from nature. And all we're trying to do is get you reconnected with how nature works, and why my dogs hunt squirrels better in the last 4 months than they did a while ago, and how they're like now rewired to hunt. Yeah, they were never hunting anything. Like, they were chasing things, but they weren't hunting. They're literally packing together and making up scenarios and like cornering squirrels so that they actually, or a chipmunk, and killing them because they're pissing them off, but they've learned how to do this whole process in the last 4 months. And we're wired the same way, how to do this stuff. And this is what we want to do with and this is more or less the idea of what it is in Unplugged. And Andy kind of leads people in the direction after what I've done is like this N=1. Hey, go be your experiment and learn from it, and then figure out how this correlates, and here's how to be a real scientist, and this is what Andy does. And so he kind of makes things, and this is our relationship, is I bounce things off of him all the time, and he's like, I'd never thought of it like that, but we need to look at this. And that's how that works.
I love it. I love the concept of, you're pushing the concept of limitless potential. I love that. I love that you see what is capable for us is just incredible. Do you think that, the more I thought about this interview, the more I thought that the reason we're so reliant on tech is because we want to be certain, and that certainty, like that deep desire to be quantifiable and tangible, it's so easy to sell from a corporate point of view. What are your thoughts on that, and how do we get around that?
I've found that that uncertainty is, look, it's a paradox largely.
Yeah.
It really is. Like, we have this concept like everything is everything, and it's kind of like there's no difference in the way you move and how you actually communicate with people and the psychology behind what it is you're doing. These are all interrelated, and they have the same thing, which is something that I can say is I'm kind of certain that this is how this is going to be, right? But the fact is we are dog shit at predicting the future. Yet we do it every single day. And we turn on a television, or we turn on the news, we turn on a station, and we listen to the new, fear and how to vicariously live through a situation, and who murdered who and why, and who had sex with who, and all this shit. And the world's dying, and we're the cause of it. And I'm not saying we're not, and I'm not saying that we don't have global warming. But the last time I saw somebody actually come up with a fucking idea, rather than sitting there talking about how bad human beings are and how we all need to follow one way. And if you're not vegan and you're not driving a smart car, you don't get rid of your car, and you're not riding your bicycle places, that you're bad. And it's like, you can't go. That's not how it works. That's not how people work. And people, yes, are looking for something. I think they're looking for not only certainty, but they're looking for discipline. They're looking to be told what to do, because they don't actually have the discipline to do the things that would allow them the freedom to be what they really are. And I think it's uncertainty. My life has really become like, I am so stoked where my life is right now, where I wake up in the morning and I go through some tasks that I have that make me feel great about the day. One's doing like dishes, one's going through my breath routine, some movement stuff, and then deciding what it is I feel like doing that day for training. Like, what do I feel? Am I following a plan anymore? Nope. I follow how I feel and what I haven't done lately, and where it is I want to go. And there's a lot of uncertainty in that. And it's scary for a lot of people to even think like that. But this is also why people have to go follow programs and want to be told what to do, is they lack the ability to kind of feel and do that. And I've followed programs to the T, and they work. And I've not followed programs, and that works. You can't come out and say, "Oh, it doesn't work to not follow a plan." If you don't have a plan, you don't have a map. All that. That's bullshit. You can absolutely not follow a plan and get somewhere. And you can follow a plan and get somewhere. And now we've got two different things. And so one's right and one's right. But it's that one's wrong. This one's right. And so this is the world we live in, where if I'm doing something, I must be right and you must be wrong. It's not, oh, that's an interesting thing. That's an interesting way of doing it. And we're using technology to tell us what to do, and to give us a finite thing. And there's nothing finite.
Of course.
This is an infinite thing.
Yeah. But I imagine the principles that you are sticking to are almost the same as when you followed a program and got results.
Certainly. Fundamentals are essential.
Yeah, of course. But it's scary, as you said, to put it all to one side and to stick solely to the why and the how, instead of just seeking a certainty of what the whole time. I don't know whether you've listened to it, but there was a great interview by Sam Harris with Kevin Kelly the other day, and they're talking about the concept of more better tech, or just removing tech altogether as the solution. What do you think?
You can't remove the tech. It's an impossibility.
Okay.
we've created a world that is so dependent and reliant on it, and we would not. Well, here's what I think would happen, and this is this is pretty tweaked, but I'm of fairly good opinion. We're in a population problem. Not that we're running out of room, but that there's just too many people. Like, look, so we've largely survived because we've been able to convince more than 150 individuals to follow us into the battlefield, regardless of what that battlefield is, whether it's a company, whether it's medical, whether it's eating a specific way, whether it's living a specific way. And so that's why we've done what we've done. And unfortunately, at 7 billion people, there's too many fucking people doing too many different things that now, and I'm not saying we all need to be following one thing. It's just there's so many people. We're at this influx of a population problem. And although I live in an area where there is basically nobody, I mean, I literally have nobody around me. There are days I don't see human beings. It still doesn't take away from the fact you go to a major city and you've got way too many people. You can't get around well, all this stuff. Too many people are like, I've got this way of thinking. I've got this way of thinking. I'm going to do this. We're all attached to this level of convenience that makes it possible for us to get around and live in these ways. And so, and I'm no different, right? I'm on a computer having a podcast, getting out information to sell a book that we, just did that we want to share information on. Like, it's all there, man. We can't just cut it. And it's only going to get more and more fine tuned. And so the idea is can we fine tune ourselves as this fine tunes? So can we get back to a place where that caveman DNA and the really good stuff about all of it allows us to get into that place that allows us to kind of be more a part of what nature really is. And that doesn't mean living on nature, all of nature's principles. We're not in a survival state anymore. It's a political state. Like people, war, famine, all of the self-created disease, first time in history, we are not dying of diseases that are literally like the Black Plagues and all of these things that were wiping out populations. We're now in a place that is self-created disease, and we're about to move into a place to where disease of the brain, where anxiety and depression, one form of anxiety, like several forms of anxiety, are going to take over the human population. And does this, you think, have anything to do with the fact that we move less and aren't exercising that way to buffer off stress?
Yeah, I completely agree.
It's hard to disagree with something like that, because it's like, oh, we can just create tech that surrounds this. And it's like, you can't buffer off. We were designed for stress. Look at any animal. It has to be doing something. It's task prioritized. We're task prioritized, yet we don't want to wake up in the morning or go to bed at night and do dishes or make our bed or fold our clothes. We want to have somebody else do that. We don't want to mow our lawns, take care of our shit. We want to go out and do what we feel like is fun, or we want to shop and we want to do this stuff. And it's like, great, but are you actually moving around more? And we're not. We're moving around less. I'm as guilty as that as anybody.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, Julian Pinot, and this is the fourth time I've mentioned him in like as many podcasts, I think, but the concept of arches and hormesis, and just the stress and the relaxation. And I think that a lot of people are mistaking comfort for contentment almost.
Yeah.
And that is where, like, being in a city, I've just moved to London and it's exactly the same. Like you look around and it's so convenient, so easy. Everything is easy. One of the reasons why I started cycling to and from everywhere, just because of that. And it's just convenient. But the stress I feel here, the anxiety, the noise, and the constant people, it's completely different to when I live back out in the sticks. It's huge.
100%. I moved to the sticks from a basin of LA. So, and we go down to LA on Sunday, and I will be in the LA area for a week. Stress levels will go through the roof. Everything's go, and it's all there, and it's right. You know, you can get anything you want anytime you want. And I'm not saying that that's not okay. What I'm saying is you've actually made a very good choice. I'm going to ride my bike because I need to move. Like, why is it anybody who's really of sound mind and has a healthy life is also moving a lot? They're just buffering off that stress. And I think this is where experimentation comes in. And it's like, you've got to be your own experiment. You've got to really understand yourself and stop looking to people for, I think, information. Look to people who are sending a message out and saying, hey, look at what I did. And I'm not necessarily the expert, although you might feel like I'm an expert in something. I know very little about this subject. It's just a very narrow area. Maybe I've inspired you to check something out or challenge something to some degree to go and experience it for yourself. And therein starts your N equals 1. Therein starts your process of learning. And education, our education system, I feel, has shat the bed. And the notion that you go in to prepare to take a test based on questions that are predetermined has ruined how we actually learn in the real world. And so everything when you get out of school becomes, there's infinite possibilities versus there's only one possibility for this answer.
Yeah.
You have to, and there's no failure in school. If you fail, you're done, right? Unfortunately, in the real world, if you fail, you actually have multiple opportunities elsewhere. Nobody's teaching that. That's what success is failure. This is what science is failure. and nobody's doing, no, we're trying to avoid this at every cost. And it's like, wake up and have a routine that you can go through that checks off a few things so that, there was this admiral from the U.S. Navy, I think, that spoke at, I think, Texas A&M. And he was like, look, there's a reason why we teach everybody to make their bed in the military, in boot camp. And we do it in boot camp, and we do it when we have our career. And then when we get out, is it any shock that most of these people are still making their beds every morning when they get up out of them? And it's because at the end of the day, if anything goes to shit, at least you made your bed and you got this clean bed that's made to get into, right? And so tasks become a part of this. And this is organization to some degree. And this is like the beauty in what, a guy like Jocko Willink and Leif Babin did with extreme ownership. Own it. Set up and get up. Like, you don't have to get up at 4:30 every day. Although I get up usually sometimes between 3 and 6. That's usually my window, but it's usually like 4:30 to 5:30, right? But I'll get, like, I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, pegged today. And I went and started working on some stuff. And then I fell back asleep and woke up right around 7 o'clock, right? But, that was my thing. And then I got up and I, do dishes and I do my routines and I set up this stuff and I have stuff I need to do throughout the day that are just tasks. But then it's like, hey, what do I feel I need to accomplish? What do I feel I need to do movement-wise? What do I want to do? Do I want to lift heavy? Do I want to go long? Do I want to go short and hard? What have I not done that's inspired or making me feel like I really want to do? Do I want to go climb a mountain? Do I want to go get in a river? I don't know, but I can go do that. And that's how I'm going to do it.
When did it become apparent that was the approach that you needed to take?
I don't like being sheep. It's not that I need to be the leader. I don't want to don't follow me. Like, somebody the other day was like, they did this huge, like 3 people in a row. They're like, I've been following Brian's work, and da-da-da-da. It's, this, that, and da-da-da-da. And so I'm following him and what he does. And I'm like, don't follow me. Just be inspired enough to take something from what I'm sharing to maybe go apply. And it's not my work if you're doing it. It's yours. And if your life's changed as a result of being inspired through that, take fucking credit for that. I'm not the one who woke you up and got you up and made you, and had you go do something and do, too many people are trying to give credit to people for doing things and turning them into gurus. And then they go make films about like how I'm not your guru, which inevitably turns them into their guru, and they follow them like they're some god. And that shit scares me, man. And that's what programs are. I'm just getting programmed to not fail. Dude, I want to fail. I want to hit walls. I want to go, oh, that didn't work. Oh, that's awesome. Like, we'll go around this and we'll try this now.
Can you talk for a bit about what's happening to take a complete left turn? What's happening when we're constantly referring to tech, maybe on a physical level and a self-talk level and mindset level as well?
Repeat that real quick.
So what's happening when we're constantly referring to tech in terms of like just checking progress, like you know exactly what you're doing, and like what's the physiological and the mental response to that?
On an extreme side of that, we now have our first cases of Parkinson's disease in people under 25.
Wow.
Which is shocking. And I'm not deep enough to say that tech has the largest connection to this, but the researchers that I know are actually saying, yes, this is the problem. And the reason is because it's a constant it's like email, Twitter, text messages. These are all dopamine. Like, this is just overload of dopamine. Like, I've got this thing I've got to check, and I've got to make sure I'm somewhere with it. And so when we've had dopamine overloads, and that, you have to understand how kind of the chemicals, the catechinoids of everything, work within the structure to a large degree. Because there's times that dopamine is a great thing, but you actually want serotonin a little bit more. And that's what happiness is involved with. Like, serotonin's involved with happiness. Dopamine's like this. It's like a crack hit, right? Like, I just did good. Awesome. Like, and I just checked that and I feel accomplished. And it's like, that there's more to it than just that one check of something. And so we're starting to see that people's, the self-diagnosis of ADD, how many people are ADD at this point, and ADHD, and this is largely because we've created a world that has us checking things constantly back and forth and not paying attention to one thing for an amount of time. We see from a visual perspective that people aren't getting out in nature enough and extending their vision. And, so I'm working with Dr. Andrew Huberman at Stanford Medicine right now on a project involving anxiety and fear. And we're integrating breathing protocols. So we've developed IP around some CO2 tolerance tests and some emotional reactivity tests that categorize you and give you specific protocols based on your character, that we actually do put out online now via Power Speed Endurance. But this literally gives you a snapshot of what you can do in the morning and the evening, and even in a time of stress, to alter the physiology, because the breathing protocols are, and Dr. Andrew Huberman is a visual and neurology PhD. And so we're seeing from the visual perspective, people don't get out in nature and they're here. They're on this computer, they're here. And they're not broadening their visual perspective, and so they're not stimulating this deeper aspect of seeing things on a horizon and spending time doing that. It's why guys like Stephen Kotler spend a third of his day out in nature, because he just feels better when he does that. And it's like, oh, weird, he's connecting that dot. But we use the breathing protocols to actually hack the body, because it's almost a software download. Like, you've got access to downloading software via your breathing vehicle. And if using the right tempos, the right frequencies, the right depth, the right inhale, the right exhale, if you just spend enough time doing this stuff, you start to learn how to manipulate your own physiology and change it and alter it so that you actually are motivated and feel good enough to go out and move. And so when we don't have these processes and these understandings, we get glued to the tech, and it's constant on, on. And oh my God, I'm freaking out. Like I just did a phone call with a guy who's training a bunch of gamers, right? And this is big business. Like these guys are making millions of dollars gaming, right? And they all freak out sometimes. And they get so angry that they can't calm down. And and it's like, dude, you're like, no wonder. And there's he's looking for breathing protocols to integrate with these guys. I'm like, yeah, that's simple, but you need to spend the time with it, or you need to have me come on and consult like with you to show you to kind of integrate some of the IP as to what these guys could do to actually calm themselves down in the moment so they're not flipping out and leaving the game. Right. And this is anything.
Yeah. Is it too, I don't know, assumptive to presume that the goal is presence and being completely still?
Yeah, I don't know that completely still's the deal, but I think presence is.
Okay.
I definitely think presence is, and I'm like, I catch myself daily, like I'm in a meeting and I'm doing something else in the meeting. And I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? And it's just, I'll immediately go into, and I'm just forcing a pattern that I know is going to put me into a more present state of what's going on. And the moment I'm locked in, I can go back to normal breathing. I can just let my autonomic nervous system pick back up, and then I'm engaged and I'm back in it, right?
Is there anything aside from the breath work on a non-tech side that you, and the getting outside, that you feel really, really brings you back to that present?
Oh, well, I think moving does. I think that's why like exercise has had such a profound effect on people. Exercise is nothing more than a hack for moving all day. We were hunter-gatherers, right? We would go hunt and we would gather. There is such thing as too much hunting and too much gathering, though. But we were largely paying enough attention to this to where our sleeping was fairly decent. We had ourselves buffered off, but it's like, look, why is it you feel so good after you work out? What happens? You're moving your body, you're using your nervous system. And what happens when you work? What happens when there's that sensation? And there's a physiological reaction, and your body does all these processes, and it's kind of infinite. But one of those big things, and just comes back to the breath work, is your breathing follows your work. And so respiration rate starts to go up, and we start to blow off more. We start to pick up the speed. And is it any wonder that 70% of all toxins in the body are removed through respiration? So we're engaging in a process that has our respiration rate going up, and we're getting rid of more toxins, and we're taking in more air, and we're trying to better our bodies to create a physiological adaptation to feeling better.
Perfect. Is there, like we've assessed, or we've very briefly touched upon the negative side of tech, really. When does it come into its own, and what kind of athletes does that really benefit?
From what I've seen, I don't think tech's really helped.
Why is that?
Athletes. I think it's largely come down to playing an illusion.
Okay.
Now, this does not, like, I don't want to take anything away from Andre DeGrasse and how fast he is, because I'm nowhere near him. And what a phenomenal athlete he is. But when you suit a guy up in Jesse Owens gear and Jesse Owens spikes on a cinder track that Jesse Owens ran on, and he's supposedly much faster than Jesse Owens, and he has to start the same way, he has to end the same way, he doesn't have the technology that they have today, and he can't run as fast as Jesse Owens. And this is, when was Jesse Owens? In the 40s? He's not fast. He wasn't faster. So we start looking at that, and it's largely, so why is he faster? Well, the track's changed. His footwear's changed. His running gear's changed. The timing system's changed. All of these variables have changed, and the training programs aren't necessarily too much different, although some of them are. We have this thing within PSE where one of the polarizing things with, like, the endurance work is like, well, you guys are too low volume. You can't just do all of that. And it's like, well, let's just take a look at what volume means. What's the difference between in running, a miler's program and a marathoner's program at the elite level? Total distance in a week. It's probably 20 to 30 miles difference. The miler's running close to 80 miles a week, and the marathoner's doing a little over 100 miles a week at the elite level. What's that difference? And it's shocking, man, because people don't want to look at stuff like that. And so it's like, well, can you handle 80 to 100 miles a week with your job and your life? No. So let's take the quality out of that and look at that. And I think that's where we're missing a lot of this stuff. And it's like, remove the hogwash and use what's necessary. Like, heart rate's great if you're using it to understand the metabolic shifts that are happening. So if you're hitting your aerobic threshold and you're supposed to go out and run at your aerobic threshold, what does that feel like? What does it feel like in your body? What is your breath doing? What is it doing? And do you know what those changes are? And so when that improves, or it goes backwards, you're able to connect that feeling to a heart rate, not the heart rate to the like, I'm not forcing the opposite of that, right? And so now I have a gross understanding of what my aerobic threshold feels like. And I also have an understanding of what maybe a stress point feels like and what a lactate threshold feels like. And these things all change. And they're changing daily. Like that. And it's like, if you don't feel those changes, then you don't know what's happening. So it's really just connecting all of that back. And I think athletes, by and large, athletes become really good at understanding this stuff. Like, Erin knew what she felt like and where she could be, like my wife. And she can outsuffer anybody. Any athlete I've ever met could not outsuffer my wife. And I've worked with a lot of high professional athletes in different sports. Her gift was the ability to suffer. And she had to get to this point to where her breathing could just be almost super relaxed and just in a rhythm. And is it any wonder why she had such a high CO2 tolerance, and why anybody else who is chasing that, or that I see doing that, is just like and out of control. And so with athletes, I just don't know that tech's what we need to be chasing. I think it's, hey, what tech are you using to understand the feeling and what you're doing and how to get better? Nice. Versus people in the past who didn't have all of this, yet were pretty much going as fast as we were and were as strong as we were. Now, I mean, look at powerlifting. How much gear do we use in powerlifting?
It's ridiculous.
And how much gear did they use 60 years ago? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I love the point about your wife, Erin, and like her intensity tolerance due to that. That's super, super interesting.
Yeah.
Where do you learn from? Where are the key influences? And I know that's a huge topic, but who stands out for you right now?
Oddly enough, so being in human performance, in the last 2 years have been more influenced by a historian than anybody else.
Who's that?
A guy by the name of Yuval Harari.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Sapiens and Homo Deus.
Okay, I was going to ask you about books as well, because last time we're on the we did this podcast, you recommended that I buy Consilience. I've read the smallest portion of it and need to get back to it, but is that still your book of choice?
Yeah, Consilience allows me, like, Consilience wraps up that whole notion of everything is everything. It's really just merging the humanities and understanding that. It's great. It's Consilience is like, I've got a top list, but in the last 2 years, Sapiens and Homo Deus have really played the biggest role for me in opening my eyes to, oh, this isn't like, this is about possibilities. I've never seen anybody, or I've never read anybody who's been able to trample over everything, yet make everything seem possible in the same instance. And it's not, and that's just it. There's nothing wrong with religion. There's nothing wrong with science. Unfortunately, when you add human beings to that become attached to being right, or control, or making money. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with making money, there's anything wrong with power, or there's anything wrong with control. They're all illusions, but they're a part of our life, and they really have just governed a lot of the insecurities that we have. And it's not that, hey, I can't live without money. I can live without money to a large degree. I can live with a lot less money than I thought. And I can live, but what I've seen is that the ups and downs of that, where it's like, hey, you make a lot of money or you don't make a lot of money. It's like, it's weird what happens when you actually do make a lot of money and you're actually given this thing of power, and you don't feel comfortable, and you don't pay attention to that. You don't listen to that. And, then you question a lot of the stuff you're doing. And that's kind of what happens. And this is where, a lot of, there's a book called Normal Accidents out there by the guy's last name is Perot. It's really, it's a tough read, but Starrett and I really grabbed onto it because it's about the coupling effect of highly integrated projects. And the human system is a highly integrated project, but taking something like a nuclear reactor. They're just bombs waiting to go off. And if one thing goes wrong that you can't see inside of it, it can set off a maelstrom of effects that literally destroy and could wreak havoc, right? Take Japan, for instance, right? I mean, perfect example of the nuclear reactor problem and a tsunami and weather and not paying attention and not understanding, right? Now, that's just one instance, but the fact is it's Chernobyl, another instance, right? These are all things, and the human body is no different. And we've gotten into this thing where we're not moving enough, right? And we're not learning to buffer off stress enough, so that stress has to go somewhere else, and it tends to go into the brain, and we manifest it ourselves, and we get addicted to comfort and these foods that make us feel like we're feeling better, but inevitably make us feel like shit. That's just a coupling effect that inevitably breaks off. And so this is what science is really there for, is to understand, hey, where did we go wrong? And yet when it becomes about power and everybody following a specific way of doing something, that's not what the idea is. The idea is just to kind of put something out there to say, hey, this is what's working for me right now. See, you should go out and play with this and see what you find out. And then maybe that'll take us in another direction. And it's like art, man. If everybody was painting like Da Vinci, if everybody was painting like, Da Vinci or Picasso or, was doing, Dali's work, if everybody's doing the same work, what would this look like? Yet you didn't see these guys going out and talking shit and fucking like making things oh, you shouldn't be painting like that and this and that and da-da-da-da. And it's like, no, they were inspired by each other's work and other artists' work. And because it gave them vision in what they saw out of that, because the flag you see behind me means something to you that it doesn't mean to me, but it doesn't mean the same thing that it means to me is that it means to my wife. And it doesn't mean the same thing to my wife as that it means to my buddy who's a Navy SEAL, right? it all has a different meaning. And it's just how we're portraying that. And there's no right or wrong in any of it. And it's the ability to kind of transcend and filter that vision of what it is you see with it versus force or trying to force people to buy into your illusion.
Yeah. I think that's an awesome place to end up, because I know you're coming short on time. But please let us know where we can find Unplugged and any other projects as well.
Yeah, you can get it on Amazon easy. It launches July 11th. On Amazon's the easiest place to get it. You guys want signed copies, you can go to Power Speed Endurance once that date hits. And we'll probably be selling them. I don't know. I might have Andy sign some and send them so that we can have both signatures on there. And then everything I'm really doing is with Power Speed Endurance and on my own social handles, which Twitter would be Brian Mackenzie, Instagram's at I Am Unscared, and then I've got my Facebook account and Power Speed Endurance as well.
Excellent, man. That's honestly, I could do a part 2, 3, 4, 5 on this. This is you've really opened my mind. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome, Tom. Thanks for having me, man.
No worries.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Alpha Movement's Mindset RX podcast. If you'd like to get exclusive content, more information about upcoming podcasts and live stream podcasts, get your questions answered, find me, Tom Foxley, all over the socials apart from Twitter, or head over to facebook.com/Alpha Movement Official. If you're listening to the podcast, you're clearly interested in mindset to aid your performance. This is what I've spent years coaching, and now I'm bringing its boxes around the world with my Mindset RX seminar. Chances are over the next year or so, I'll be heading to your box or a box near you to show you how much impact mindset can have on your performance. If you're interested in either hosting or attending the Mindset RX seminars, shoot an email to tom@alphamovement.co and we'll see what we can do. Remember, you can also get your hands on my 2 books, Intensity Tolerance and The Impossible Art of Consistency, by searching for Tom Foxley or Mindset RX on Amazon. Anyone who buys a copy helps directly support this show. So to all of you who bought coffee, thank you, and I'll see you soon for another episode of the Mindset RX podcast.